Anna Jane Pritchett, current UA GIST Master's student. Welcome to the University of Arizona GIST podcast. Our host is Chris Lukenbiel with special co-host Shay Lamar. Today is part 3 of our Leaders in GIS group podcast. We welcome back Mark Cristiano, Jenna Levier, Steve Whitney, and Jean Trobia. Let's get started.
Hi, I'm Chris Lukenbiel, the Director of GIST Programs at the University of Arizona, and welcome to the UA GIST podcast. And with me today, my special co-host, Shay Lamar from ASU. This is an all-state podcast. Welcome, Shay.
Thank you, Chris. My name is Shay Lamar. I am the Director of GRS at ASU. I also teach in their MAS GIS program, and I am the Vice Chair of the AGIC Council. Mark, why don't we pass it to you?
Hi, my name is Mark Cristiano. I'm the GIS coordinator for the Kaibab National Forest. Some of my other hats are I'm the Forest Service rep to the AGIC Council, and I'm one of the co-chairs for the LIDAR work group.
Steve, why don't we pass it to you now?
Hi, I'm Steve Whitney. I am a GIS manager at Pima County. I am also the current chair of the AGIC Council.
Jenna?
Hi, I'm Jenna Levier. I'm the Deputy State Cartographer for Arizona. I work at Arizona State Lands. I'm also the AGIC mascot, I guess, for those of you that know me. I'm co-chair on several committees, but one of them is LIDAR with Mark.
And Jean.
Hi, I'm Jean Trobia. I used to be the state cartographer, and before that I was a GIS manager at Pima County, and currently I'm the past president of AGIC, and I still am involved with NISGIC as the co-chair of the transportation or address and transportation committee.
And Steve, you at Pima County just had a number of new job openings recently. So you must have been going through a ton of candidates. And I know it wasn't all the same job. Remind me again, which types of openings did you have? What were their titles?
We had everything from technicians to GIS analysts to senior GIS analysts. For example, we're currently trying to recruit 3 GIS analysts. We had 52 applications that made it through HR's screening of the minimum qualifications. So we're seeing a lot of people out there looking for jobs. And yeah, we're very fortunate to be in the position we're in right now. So yeah, it's going well.
So, and the way that we've been discussing hard and soft skills, you have 3 types of jobs. Maybe this would help as a discussion topic. You had the technician, the analyst, and then was it a senior?
Senior analyst, yeah.
What were some of the skill sets? How would the hard skill sets differ between those positions? Like, what would you look for in a technician versus an analyst? What would be the difference?
Sure. Yeah, so technician is going to be more data-centric type tasks and projects. So we're looking for a certain level of experience and or education along those lines. As you move into the GIS analyst type positions, you're looking for more cartographic skills, more database and analysis type skills. As you move into the senior analyst position, that's where some of the project management stuff comes into play. Some of the more advanced analysis using, being very familiar with things like imagery and database and programming, between, the analyst you get started into programming, the senior analyst, at least for our organization, is very heavy into programming and scripting and application development. You start getting into the more enterprise level projects and applications, web mapping systems, more data analytics. Although as we've heard, I think Gene mentioned it before, even at our technician level, we don't want them to feel like they're pigeonholed into everything that they're doing. We emphasize to them to take some time to learn other things that maybe is not within their particular skill set or job description, but feel free to branch out, ask questions of other people in the organization, take time during your week to try new technology, play with some of the new cool tools and stuff like that. So we do want people to grow within their current positions as well. And we really look for people to move up the ladder as people leave our organization. We look primarily to fill from within, and then go out when we need to.
Okay, Jean, do you have anything for the different levels of jobs and what you look for in each of those?
Yeah, that's one thing I was thinking of as this conversation was going on. So we've been talking about, really entry-level positions, and that certainly is something that's going to happen. And one thing that I don't know that we focused on a lot is it's a great chance to build networks. I think it was mentioned once, but it really is a great networking opportunity in either internships or entry level. Just start to get to know people in the community. Most of the jobs I applied for as an entry level person came over, online or in paper. More and more it came as word of mouth, and people would contact me about jobs. And the last 2 or 3 jobs I've had were more people reaching out. As state cartographer, and I think, if you look at some organizations, commercial and not-for-profits, when I was looking for new entry people, I wasn't looking for digitizers. As state cartographer, that was GIS coordination and GIS information sharing. So I was looking for people who were good at websites and people who can consolidate data from other sources and put them into graphics that were easily understood by a lot of different communities. So it was tailoring data to be information to meet the needs of specific groups. And that's what I was looking for. I was looking for people that could help me with organization and structure and information exchange. So I don't know that every entry-level position necessarily is going to be all digitizing. I can think of other people that were advertising for jobs similar, and you may, out of school, go for one of those kind of jobs, and you may be surprised to find out that you're integrating or doing a lot with information and organizing information in a GIS package, and then using web services or other means to get that information out. So that there's different levels that could happen. But I'd say over time, or not over time, but as you advance through your careers, the opportunities for those kinds of things increase. And that's where the schooling comes in really well. And I got to say, between U of A and ASU, I've seen both. And I really like that people are working in teams and are getting used to working with each other and banking off of each other's strengths and, founding up the other, supporting other people's weaknesses in a team. So that's what I wanted to add. Thank you.
So before we leave the question of technical skills and hard skills behind, and everyone has emphasized soft skills as an important element, I have to bring in one question to somebody that hasn't been asked yet. And it's the infamous Sheamar Test to see if you're employable at Arizona State University. And it would be so infamous that the students would know about it too and be like, wonder if I can pass the Sheamar Test. So can you want to divulge some of what used to be on the Sheamar Test to find employment at ASU with you?
Well, okay, so I didn't realize it was infamous because I have a worse test that I just gave to the students in the MAS GIS program. So most of the people will know Tim Smothers out of the city of Peoria. And when they were hiring, so a lot of times when you apply for a new job at the GIS technician level, I don't know, it seems to me half the times it's just an interview, but the other half of the time, this is video, so people on screen, not if people have to do a technical test when they apply for a technician job at your place of work. Steve, do you require technical tests? Okay, so Mark and Steve don't, Jenna and Jean have. So the city of Peoria used to give what I think of as the most challenging technical test for a GIS tech position. And every year, after the students finish the first 2 classes of GIS, I give them this test. And it's the first time I took it, you have a 90-minute limit, and I have to say I was starting to hyperventilate, and I've been doing this over 20 years. So, but it's as basic as select this particular section. Now within that section, do a selection of parcels based on A. Now do subset, a typical site selection using his data. You have to do attribute queries, spatial queries, labeling, just the most basic stuff that you've easily been doing for the past 2 classes. Here's the challenge that I run into with the students and the reason I love to give it. As Mark mentioned before, and this is another reason why I love internships or volunteer work of any type. No matter how good your professor, in your program, you have been handed, I want you to do this. At the very beginning, they give you every step. They give you pictures of the buttons, and then they give you the data in a good format. Then as you advance on, they'll stop giving you the pictures of the buttons, but they still tell you, I need this, and you will do step A, B, C, and D to get to it. And the assumption is you've learned the buttons, and the data's pretty clean. This is not clean data. He tells you, I need you to find this based on these 6 factors, go, and at the end, make it look like this. So I love this because it's the first time that students who have not had any type of internship have just been asked a question like a normal person would ask it. If I am hiring you as an intern, I want you to learn, but I don't want to give you every single, certain internships will do that. But how about this? If I'm hiring you for entry level, even to work in my area, you have to have the basic understanding. So I like that they have to figure out the workflow process on their own. They have to figure out the data on their own. They have to understand what I meant when I asked the question without me breaking it down into every step. And someone else mentioned this earlier. I reinforce there's no single right way to do it. They all think, as Mark mentioned, oh, I learned this fancy tool. I must have to use a fancy tool to do it. Maybe I need to write a Python script. No, use the interactive select button and hold the shift key down. So I love these tests and internships because it's the first time I found that you're just expected to, I give you a few sentences, just go for it. There's no right way, there's no wrong way. Think about it, be logical, and step through. And that is a huge mind-blowing exercise for anyone who has not done GIS out of an Esri course or an academic course. So, yeah, I can't speak highly enough of volunteer projects, paid internships, unpaid internships, just getting all the experience you can, which really quickly, oh, yes, Mark had a similar point. Something else I try to drill with my students, I'd like to ask you quickly about resumes. I try and get them, in a resume, the listing of the classes you took and the skills you learned, yes, that helps me determine, did you get through the computer system because you know the minimal amount. But when you can talk to me about the projects you worked on, that's when I learn that you actually know what you're talking about, and you're not just typing the words ArcMap, ArcPro. So Mark, you were nodding. Are there secrets to resume, or not even secrets, but ways to get that information across other than just listing the words on the resume?
Oh, I guess I wasn't directly nodding for that, but going back to what I talked about earlier about when you get through the system, the HR people are looking for those buzzwords that get you to my list. And then most of my questions are not, do you know ArcMap? It's, tell me about a project that you worked on. Tell me about difficulties. How did you overcome that? And that's where, like, the good candidates shine. They will be like, oh, I was faced with this problem and this is what I did to overcome that. So that's what I look for when I'm interviewing people. So.
And Jenna, I know you just hired an intern for ESLD. Did you get into the types of projects, or was it more checkbox the skills?
No, we did have discussion on the projects, and it's interesting because we have a different kind of interviewing for interns than we do for technicians or analysts at Arizona State Land. Our expectations are a little different. In both ways, we want to hear about projects, and we want to hear how people put together a solution based on a problem of some kind and how they worked through that. We definitely want that piece of that bit of detail. What we've learned at Land in our process of interviewing that's, I think, a little more challenging than in the private sector. For a government job, we were limited in how we can interact and what information we can give. So it can make a candidate very, very nervous in an interview to be just asked a question. We cannot expand on the question. We cannot help you understand what the question is. All we can do is ask it. And then the candidate has to respond however they think is the best response to that question. It's a really interesting way of interacting in an interview situation that most people are not, they don't have that experience unless they've applied for a government job. So I think, if students and folks coming into the industry are interested in public service, and, as somebody that's been in public service for a long time, I would recommend it in a lot of ways. It's very rewarding. You have to look at the world a little differently. With the federal government as well as state government, there is bureaucracy and there are rules that we have to abide by. So what that does is it presents an opportunity for you to really shine, for a candidate to really shine, but you have to do that on your own. It's not fed to you. So I think it's important to note that difference.
Steve, is there anything you'd like to add to the discussion about resumes and how to get your experience across?
Yeah, I agree that we glean much more pertinent information from project descriptions than just a checklist of skills. I just wanted to follow on with Jenna about the interview process, especially for government. It's the same, at least at the local level for Pima County. First interview process is very rigid. We have a EEOC rep present to make sure that all we can do is ask the question. We can have no additional dialogue with the candidate. All we can do is repeat the question. So it's very sterile environment and very intimidating to anybody that has not been through a government interview before. We've worked around that a little bit in terms of we now approach our first interview process a little differently with people. It's typically 4 questions at the most. And again, one of those questions is definitely talk about projects you worked on. And then our second interview is wide open. We don't have an EEOC rep present. We can have an actual dialogue with them. So basically, we look at areas of their first interview that we'd like to get more information from, and then really use that second interview as a chance to get to know them personally, and some of their personal traits and stuff. The other thing to mention in terms of resumes and such is, at least in Pima County, I think for all government agencies, you put in an application, and that's the primary source of the information that we draw from. And typically folks will mimic their application against their resume. And then we have their resume as secondary information to fill in any gaps. So you definitely want to make sure when you're filling out an application to include as much information as you can that you normally would on a resume as well. And also include your resume with your application if that's allowed too.
Yeah, I'm glad we're switching from resumes to interviews, because they're both very important, but they're different experiences. I mean, it's how do you get your information across? How do you tell people who you are and stand out? And for academics like myself, I don't have the experience that you all do. And the interview process varies greatly. And from what I've seen from city, county, state interviews or heard, it's very different for what students to understand. And so I've been grateful to have people like Gene and Steve and Rudy Strickland and others kind of contribute to the students' understanding of those processes. But Gene, I thought maybe I'd ask you, and then maybe we'd work the grid for a minute and say, interviews. Got a new student hitting the market and first interview or out. What do you recommend? Like how to, other than keeping your cool and brush your teeth, what do you recommend for a first interview for somebody?
Well, I want to echo what Steve said. I couldn't agree, I won't go and reiterate everything, but just everything Steve said about the interview process. Before people can get to an interview, they've got to have a resume that looks professional. And I know there's assistance in the programs that you and Shay teach on how to develop your resumes and make it look really good. And use bullets. Don't sentence everything out, but things that are really appropriate to make it in the door. And two things: the larger the organization, the more you're going to have to make it through HR. So tailor each resume and application to that job. If you're using certain words for experience that you have, and you see buzzwords in the job announcement, switch those to those buzzwords so you make it through HR. And then, like Steve said, the next thing is you're going to be interviewing with a person to get a feel for you on how you respond to pressure, how you relate to people, what's your experience. And I would go back to, I think a number of people have said it, there's a certain basic level of GIS proficiency that we want people to have. But what we're looking for are team players and people who understand that they're there to problem solve. And if you, during an interview, the interviewer will ask very general questions, or I do at least, I'll ask very general questions. And what I'm looking for are very specific answers. So I'm not looking for general answers. I'm looking for, here's the project I did, here's the problems that we had, and here's how we overcame them. So I really would encourage folks to not choke and not just be too nervous, although it's hard sometimes, but come up with as specific responses as you can to answer the questions that you get.
So Mark, you've also been involved with many interviews in the process as well. Do you have any recommendations for people trying to break into the GIS industry?
Yeah, I guess I'm sitting here thinking of three specifically. One, USA Jobs is a terrible system, but it's literally the only way into the federal government. So stick with it. Do not submit a PDF resume. Use their resume builder. Because what happens is someone in HR who has no idea how to spell GIS is going to review that. And if they have to sift through a resume, they don't want to do that. The HR system is designed to tell them if you qualified or not. And so therefore, USA Jobs has a resume builder, and use it, and then also attach your PDF resume as a document. But do not just throw your resume in, because somewhere an HR person who's got 500 to look at will ignore you. Number two, and this, my brother actually told me this piece of advice, when you go into an interview, think of like 5 or 10 solid examples of what you can do really well. And that way, when an interviewer asks you a question, you have this pre-prepared list in your mind of like, oh, I will tell them about this. Oh, I will tell them about that. One of the mistakes I've seen interviewers do is tell the same story over and over again for every question. And when you're sitting there as a reviewer, you end up writing the same thing down over and over. So if you have that mental list of like these 5 projects, you can just, when Gene asks you that question, you'd be like, oh, let me tell them about this one. Let me tell them about that one. And so that's a really effective thing. And then the final thing is be prepared to ask a question back to your interviewers. The way we have gotten around here are the 10 stock questions and we can't ask you or tell you anything else, our final question is always, what do you have any questions for us? And that means we can respond to your question with more information. So I can't tell you how many people I've interviewed who I asked that question and they're like, nope. And I'm like, really? You have no questions whatsoever about the job you are applying for. So I highly encourage you, even if you already know the answer, just ask a question of your interviewers. To me, it shows that you're thinking about the job and that you want it, and that you want to know more about it. So those are the 3 things I would probably recommend to anybody going in an interview. So.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, Mark. I always tell any student and even any colleague that you got to do your homework. I mean, you might be leaving Shay and me behind, but homework is for life. Know everything you can about the organization. Be able to be the one that's asking questions about, so where is your organization going? What are the future projects? And think about how, not only how you can contribute. I always have a saying, it's a terrible saying, but it works. I think we all have some of those, that if you catch yourself selling too much, start buying in an interview, meaning you better keep the focus on them and show them that you're interested.
Jenna or Steve, would either of you like to add anything to the interview experience? Jenna?
Sure. I really like what Mark had to share with us, and I agree with the buying and selling. Even if that's a terrible statement, I think it's true. I think I would remind folks that the interview time, that is not just for the employer to learn about you. It is time for you to learn about your employer as well. So always ask questions. I would reiterate that for sure. Always ask questions and see if you want to be there, because it's not a given, even if you get an interview, that's going to be a good fit for you, but be thinking about that. I think the other thing, as far as doing well in an interview and having confidence beyond preparation, like Mark said, come up with those 5 or 6 different projects that you can talk about. I think practice with your best friend, practice with your dog, practice so that when you're asked the questions, you don't freeze, and you know that. And then you get over some of the nervousness. I think practicing is important. See what you want to know and do your homework. So that's all I would add.
Steve, did you have any comments or about interviews?
I think we've pretty well covered it. They're tough, so definitely prepare as much as you can, especially for government interviews. They're a whole lot different than the private sector.
Yeah, I always like to remind people that, remember the basics too. Get some sleep, don't do too much coffee, brush your teeth, dress nice, you forget the basics and they catch up with you. When I was on the job market for professorships, I used to tell other PhD students the number one most important thing: make sure your breath smells nice. It's those first impressions. You just never know what it's going to be. But I wanted to thank everybody for joining us today, and it's been a wonderful roundtable about GIS leadership and what it's like to, get started in the GIS industry. And this group well knows, but one place to get started is to go through the Arizona Geographic Information Council and be a volunteer, get involved with the organization and the upcoming conference that we are having pretty soon. And I thought kind of along those lines, I think it's important maybe just to end with maybe asking each of you, what's the best way that you stay current and active in the GIS industry, and what gets you excited these days to enjoy your professional career? Why do you still do it? Why are you still, hanging out and loving life in GIS? And maybe I'll start in the corner with Jenna and see what you have to say.
It's no question for me. The reason I stay in GIS and what we're doing, particularly in Arizona, is the people. The people are amazing, and we're solving big problems together, and that is really cool to be a part of. There is such a wide variety of expertise and knowledge in Arizona. I love bringing all of those people into the same room and working together. It's exciting, and I have to put a plug in for the AGIC conference. Like Chris mentioned, that's where you get to rub shoulders with each other. And even though this year we're virtual, you'll still get to network, you'll still get to meet people, you'll still get to hear about how we're making Arizona better. It will be exciting. I hope you join us. Thank you.
How about you, Jean? I've looked up to you as a mentor and for years in the GIS community. What keeps you going and excited about life and the universe and everything GIS? And
So to me, it's the community. We've talked about entry-level positions and stuff, but over the 30 plus years I've had, I've gotten to do more and more complex things. And a lot of what I've done has been involved at the national level and representing Arizona at the national level. And I've been really fortunate because between AGIC in the state and NISGIC nationally, which is the National States Geographic Information Council, the community of people that are there are, even though I'm semi-retired, are what keep me active and involved in a lot of the issues. So for me right now, what's keeping me involved a lot is the National Address Database and developing data that would allow next generation 911 to happen. So, some of my most favorite people in the world are on this call and are on this webcast, and are the community that just really keeps me energized.
well, and I have to now ask the question to Shay Lamar that I start to feel like we're very young, Shay, but I do remember even when I started at Arizona State University that you were doing GIS back then, and you've stayed on and made an incredible career there. What keeps you excited? There's just so much wonderful changes going on with GIS at ASU, but you're your work has not just been at that institution. You've extended out throughout the state for years. Why do you still do all what Sheamar does?
There are quite a few reasons. It started because it was a field where you could use technology and you could get out in the field. So for geographers, it was the perfect mix of I'm outside sometimes and I'm inside sometimes. Then I also like, although this has changed slightly, when I started, you could be an expert in GIS and then work in a variety of subject matter fields. So I can do that now because I'm a project manager and because I have programmers and developers. So sometimes I work with archaeologists, sometimes I work with utility companies, sometimes I work with range experts. So the variety that you get, I have to qualify that with the fact that if you're coming up in GIS now, you don't just learn GIS as a tool. If it's just a tool, you need a subject matter expertise. Otherwise, it's a career, in which case you're doing database or programming. But it's evolved into the fact that I love to solve, and I swear I wrote this down before Jenna spoke. I love to solve problems, help people solve their business needs, and I love to work with people to help them solve the problems. And you can do that in GIS. So that's why I still do it. Before I pass this to Steve, I did want to say that I just want to strongly say that the internships and volunteer opportunities, the ability to meet people is huge. And I finally took my own advice, even outside of the AGIC conference. There are a lot of committees where you can meet people and become more familiar on LIDAR, remote sensing, outreach, conference committee. I finally took my own advice and I just got brought into the national level conference, NISGIC, just back in March. I know nothing about the group. There's no way I can help them at this point, but I just volunteered for a committee because I want to learn more about it and I want to meet the people in it. So even though I almost didn't, because I thought I have nothing to add, why would I join them? And I tell my students to do this all the time. I'm going to join them and I'm going to learn about them and I'm going to meet people that I admire. So I finally took my own medicine and did that. So I recommend you do that with AGIC or the Phoenix Geo or the Pima County Tucson Co-op. Meet more people and make those connections. Steve, how about you?
Yeah, so that was going to be one thing I touched on that you just ended with, was even though we talk about AGIC a lot, and you've heard us talk about NISGIC, there are local community organizations for GIS. So you can start small, get to know your local community, move up as you feel comfortable on your own pace. And then, the things that keep me in GIS, you heard me say I'm a data geek, so I love the data side of it. That's just fun for me. The visualness of GIS, being able to deal with data visually is outstanding. And it's grown so big that there's always something new to learn. So recently I've learned ArcGIS Server, from installing the software to configuring the damn security certificates to publishing web services, and all that goes along with it. So there's so many different facets of GIS now these days to learn that I don't think you can never learn them all, and there'll always be something new to learn. And also I wanted to mention, in terms of where do you get your information, yes, we've talked a lot about community, but given the digital age that we're in and the social media and all the different ways that you can get information, there's so many resources out there to learn new things about GIS and what people are doing with GIS, from all the Esri stuff to other GIS spaces out there and blogs, and it's just an amazing time to absorb all this great stuff and do good stuff with it.
Thank you. Mark, how about you? What keeps you going in GIS?
This may sound a tad repetitive at this point. I like helping people. I like the challenges. When I was with the Park Service, they make you do a Myers-Briggs personality test, and I think one of my traits was enjoys bringing order to the chaos. And so, like, I like when things are messy and I get to fix them and put them in their little boxes. It makes me feel good. I think the thing that maybe hasn't been said, and this might be unique to me, um, when I think there's a lot of GIS jobs out there where you work on a project and then you move on to the next project, and it may be someplace completely different. And when I was a research assistant at the URI, I would work on one national park and then on another and then on another. And like after a few years, I went back and asked the first guy, like, "Hey, using that database?" "Oh yeah, it's on a shelf somewhere." Like they never touched what I had built, kind of thing. And I was really frustrated. One of the things that really gets me up and going and I really enjoy is I pour all of my energy into the Kaibab National Forest. And that's really rewarding because once I fix that, then that part is solved. It doesn't, re-break when I go somewhere else, kind of thing. So like we now have LiDAR. That checkbox is done. Now I can go on to build the roads or the trails or something. And I enjoy pouring myself into one place of my energy. And I think that's really rewarding. And I don't know if that translates to other areas as well, but I liked that about the National Park Service, the U.S. Forest Service. You are protecting that one spot. Whatever else happens in the rest of the world, I've fixed this one area. At least I hope I did. Leaving that spot better than how you found it, I think is really rewarding for me. So.
I appreciate that comment, Mark, on the conclusion. It reminded me just really generally of like, what is geography? It's Earth representation, and how GIS is really about managing our ongoing understanding of geography and trying to make the world a better place. And we're kind of doing it at different scales throughout the state and connecting it up. And you can't just do it yourself. We have to be interconnected, and that's why our community is so important and kind of working together on this. And so I appreciate that everybody took some time to join us on the joint U of A ASU special podcast. And hopefully we'll be able to see everybody virtually this year and then maybe back in person next year. And as Steve pointed out, yeah, it's not just AGIC, Shay's got a number of events up there. Maricopa does as well. Mark's got a few going on up in Flagstaff, and Steve and I do down here in Tucson. So please come out and join us and get to know your community, have some fun. Thank you, guys. We'll be seeing you around the water cooler and the AGIC shops.